I'm Pat Henneberry, Senior VP for Commodities at Imperial Sugar. This month's USDA WASDE report for July 2010 was an interesting report. We saw several changes in the supply and demand for the current year in 2009-10. The quota increase that was announced last week by USDA was inserted into the estimate, increasing the supply by 275,000 tons, which indicates they expect a 25,000 ton shortfall. There was also a reduction in beet sugar acres or production of 50,000 tons and an increase in production of Florida raw sugar by 8,000 tons for a net increase of 42,000 tons of domestic production. Imports from Mexico were reduced by 110,000 tons, and thus leaving a net stocks-to-use ratio at the end of 9-10 at 11.8%, which is up from last month. Looking forward at 2010-11, the USDA raised the estimate of the beet crop to 4.71 million tons from 4.63 million tons, reflecting the higher acreage that came at with the June acreage report, showing the final results of the planting season in the beet territory. The demand estimates were not changed this time. Thus, we are increasing the relative stocks-to-use ratio and the relative supply. We think that these numbers are directionally right, with the exception of the imports from Mexico. And at the moment, the prices in the U.S. have gone high enough that we're beginning to draw sugar from Mexico into the U.S. again. So while at the time the USDA did this report, it may have the estimate for Mexico was probably correct. Subsequent market movements have caused more sugar to be drawing this way, and it's likely that we'll get most of that extra 100,000 tons of imports from Mexico, which will make the current year's supply and demand much closer to adequate. Depending on the level of demand, and USDA still has lower demand levels than many in the trade, we still could experience periods of tightness as we go through the rest of this summer and into the early fall. The quota that was just announced was a much-needed addition to supply in this country, and prices have held relatively stable for having that much additional sugar added into the supply, which indicates that demand for raw sugar is more than adequate to handle that. So we're viewing the market as relatively firm for the rest of this fiscal year ending in September, and the beginning of the succeeding year should also be firm because quota supplies won't become readily available until the new crops in Central America that start in November and December. So I think it was an interesting WASDE. We've had lots of changes, but still reflecting a relatively tight supply and demand.